Have you ever stopped to think why? In an era where we have instant access to all accumulated human information, where algorithms can predict our desires before we even feel them, and where artificial intelligence solves problems that have challenged our species for millennia, we feel lonelier, more misunderstood, and disconnected than ever before. This is not just a cruel irony of progress. It is the symptom of a profound crisis that is approaching like a silent storm, and by 2026 will reach proportions that will fundamentally transform how we live, love, and exist in the world. The intelligence we are losing doesn't appear in any IQ test. It is not measured by algorithms, nor quantified in data. It is the intelligence that allows us to look into another person's eyes and understand not just what they are saying, but what they are feeling behind the words. It is the ability to navigate the complex labyrinth of human emotions, to create genuine connections in a world that increasingly values superficial and performative interactions. It is the ancestral wisdom of how to be truly human in the company of other humans, a skill that our species took hundreds of thousands of years to develop and that we are losing in a single generation. Imagine a 20-year-old young woman sitting in a coffee shop, surrounded by dozens of people, but completely absorbed by the luminous screen of her phone. She has 2,000 friends on social media, receives hundreds of likes on her photos, maintains simultaneous conversations with 15 different people through messaging apps. By digital standards, she is extremely connected and socially successful. But when she looks up and sees an older man at the next table, clearly distressed, perhaps struggling with some deep pain reflected in every line of his face, she cannot decode these emotional cues. She doesn't know how to offer a simple gesture of humanity, a smile of understanding, a kind word. His body language is a code she never learned to read because she grew up in a world where emotions are expressed through emojis and human connections are mediated by algorithms that filter and simplify the infinite complexity of human emotional experience. This young woman is not an isolated case. She represents an entire generation that is growing up with a radically different form of social intelligence, one that privileges digital curation of personality over emotional authenticity, speed of response over depth of reflection, amplification of one's own ego over genuine understanding of the other, and the consequences of this transformation go far beyond what we can imagine. To understand the magnitude of what we are losing, we need to go back to the origins of human emotional intelligence. For most of our history as a species, our survival depended completely on our ability to read, interpret, and respond appropriately to the emotional states of other members of our group. A hunter who could not perceive when his companion was afraid, injured, or in danger, not only put the mission at risk, but threatened the survival of the entire tribe. A mother who could not interpret the subtle signs of discomfort, hunger, or illness in her baby saw her genetic lineage come to an end. A person who could not navigate the political and emotional complexities of the social group soon found themselves isolated, exiled, or dead. For this reason, over millions of years of evolution, we developed extraordinarily sophisticated neural systems to process emotional information. Our brains became incredibly efficient machines for detecting facial microexpressions that last only fractions of a second, for interpreting almost imperceptible tonal variations in voice, for sensing the subtle energetic changes that accompany different emotional states. We learn to synchronize our heart rhythms and breathing with those around us, creating a form of communication that transcends words and allows us to literally feel what the other is feeling. This capacity for empathy and emotional connection was not just a social luxury. It was the fundamental technology that allowed us to form cohesive groups, create complex cultures, develop language, art, music, and all the other achievements that define human civilization. When two humans connect emotionally in a genuine way, something magical happens at the neurological level. Their brains begin to synchronize, creating coordinated patterns of neural activity that enable a form of collective cognition that is much more powerful than any individual mind could achieve alone. But now, for the first time in human history, we are creating a social environment that not only does not reward these emotional skills, but actively inhibits them and replaces them with artificial forms of connection that simulate intimacy without ever truly achieving it. The digital platforms that dominate our social lives were designed by engineers with a very limited understanding of human psychology and optimized for metrics that have little to do with genuine emotional well-being. They maximize screen time, number of clicks, frequency of interaction, but do not measure the quality of human connection, the depth of mutual understanding, or the degree of emotional intimacy being created. The result is a system that addicts people to forms of social validation that are simultaneously intense and empty. When you receive 100 likes on a photo, your brain releases a small but significant dose of dopamine, creating the momentary sensation of connection and social approval. But this sensation is fundamentally different from the dopamine that is released when you have a genuine and deep conversation with someone who really understands who you are. The first is quick, artificial, and quickly dissipates, leaving you hungry for more. The second is slower to build, but creates a lasting sense of satisfaction and belonging that nourishes the human soul in ways that digital interactions simply cannot replicate. The problem becomes even more complex when we consider how these changes are affecting children's brain development. The human brain continues developing until 25 years of age, and the experiences a person has during this critical period literally sculpt the neural architecture that will determine how they process emotions and relate to others for the rest of their lives. A child who grows up primarily interacting with screens and algorithms is developing fundamentally different neural patterns from a child who grows up in environments rich in direct human emotional interaction. Recent neuroscience studies show that children who spend more than 3 hours a day on digital devices present measurable differences in gray matter density in brain regions responsible for emotional processing, empathy, and impulse regulation. Their amygdalae, the brain structures that process fear and other intense emotions, show different activation patterns. making them more prone to anxiety, depression, and emotional regulation difficulties. At the same time, regions of the prefrontal cortex that are responsible for empathy and understanding others' intentions and emotions show less connectivity and reduced activation. This means that an entire generation is growing up with brains that are literally less capable of forming deep emotional connections. It's not that they don't want to connect with others. It's that they don't have the neural circuits necessary to do so effectively. It's like trying to play symphonic music with instruments that can only produce a few basic notes. The music is still possible, but the rich harmonic complexity that defines a great composition is lost forever, and the consequences have already begun to manifest in alarming ways. Rates of depression and anxiety among young adults have tripled in the last 15 years. The number of people who report having no close friends has doubled in the last decade. Marriages are lasting shorter, and when they end, it's often because partners report feeling misunderstood, unseen, or emotionally neglected by each other. We are seeing the emergence of an epidemic of loneliness that is affecting people of all ages, but is particularly severe among those who grew up in the digital age. Doctors have begun documenting something they are calling chronic emotional hunger, a condition where people feel constantly unsatisfied in their relationships, always searching for something deeper, more real, more emotionally nourishing, but unable to identify what exactly is missing or how to find it. It's like having chronic thirst, but only having access to drinks that don't really hydrate. You keep drinking, but the thirst never really goes away. I want to pause for a moment to ask you directly, do you recognize this feeling in your own life? This subtle but persistent hunger for real connection, for being truly seen and understood by another human being? Those moments when you are surrounded by people, perhaps even at a party or social gathering, but feel deeply alone because you perceive that all conversations happen on a superficial surface, touching only the safest and most performative aspects of each person's personality. I know many of us carry this feeling in silence, sometimes not even being able to name exactly what is missing. But if this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It can be as simple as writing, "I feel this emotional hunger when." Your honesty may be exactly what another person needs to read today to realize they are not alone in this search for genuine connection. What makes this situation even more tragic is that the technology causing the problem could also, in theory, be part of the solution. We have more powerful communication tools than any previous generation in human history. We can instantly connect with any person anywhere on the planet. We can share thoughts, ideas, art, and music with an ease that our ancestors would consider literally magical. But we are using these incredible tools in ways that diminish rather than amplify our capacity for deep emotional connection. The reason for this lies in the incentive structures that govern the digital economy. Technology companies make money by maintaining our attention, and they have discovered that the most effective emotions for capturing and maintaining attention are anger, fear, envy, and outrage. Emotions like compassion, empathy, gratitude, and serenity, which are fundamental for emotional well-being and healthy social connections, are simply not as effective at generating clicks and screen time. This has created a digital environment that is constantly pushing us toward our worst emotional instincts. Recommendation algorithms amplify content that makes us angry or anxious because this type of content generates more engagement. Social networks encourage us to curate idealized versions of our lives that have little to do with our real emotional experience. Dating apps reduce the infinite complexity of human attraction and compatibility to a few photos and catchy phrases, creating a culture of romantic disposability that makes it increasingly difficult to form lasting emotional bonds. But perhaps even more concerning is how these changes are affecting our relationship with ourselves. Emotional intelligence is not just about understanding others, it is also about developing a healthy and conscious relationship with our own emotional states. It means knowing how to recognize when we are stressed, sad, angry, or anxious. It means having the skills to regulate these emotions in constructive ways instead of simply trying to escape them through digital distractions. But we now live in a culture that treats any emotional discomfort as a problem to be immediately solved rather than valuable information to be understood. When we feel lonely, instead of exploring what this loneliness might be trying to communicate about our deeper emotional needs, we immediately pick up the phone and get lost in infinite feeds of distraction. When we feel anxiety, instead of practicing breathing techniques or mindfulness that help us process this anxiety in healthy ways, we take medication or isolate ourselves in virtual worlds where we can temporarily forget our real problems. The result is a population that is becoming increasingly emotionally illiterate. People who can navigate incredibly complex digital systems, but don't know how to have a difficult conversation with a romantic partner. Individuals who can optimize marketing campaigns using sophisticated data analysis, but cannot identify when they are professionally burned out or what they need to do to restore their emotional balance. Highly educated professionals who can solve complex technical problems but feel completely lost when it comes to creating emotional intimacy in their personal relationships. And here we arrive at the core of Harari's warning about 2026. It's not that an emotional apocalypse will suddenly happen on that specific date. It's that 2026 represents the tipping point where an entire generation of people who grew up primarily in the digital age will reach full adulthood and begin forming families, careers, and the social structures that will determine the direction of our civilization for the next 50 years. Imagine a society where the majority of people struggle to form deep and lasting emotional bonds, where marriages dissolve not because of dramatic conflicts, but because of a gradual erosion of emotional intimacy, where parents love their children deeply, but don't know how to connect with them emotionally in ways that nourish them and help them develop into emotionally healthy human beings, where work colleagues collaborate efficiently on technical projects, but are unable to create the kinds of trust and mutual understanding that make work deeply satisfying and meaningful. This is not dystopian science fiction. It is the path we are clearly walking now, and the costs are already becoming visible across multiple dimensions of human life. In physical health, chronic loneliness and emotional isolation are being linked to an impressive array of medical problems, from cardiovascular disease to compromised immune systems. Studies show that loneliness has an impact on mortality equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. People who feel chronically disconnected have significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, early dementia, and even cancer. In the sphere of relationships, we are seeing concerning patterns of instability and dissatisfaction. Divorce rates remain high, but even more significant is the growing number of people who simply avoid serious relationships, entirely because they don't trust their ability to sustain them emotionally. Dating apps have created a culture where the next option is always just a swipe away, making it increasingly difficult to invest in the patience and emotional work necessary to build real intimacy over time. And perhaps most alarming, we are seeing these trends amplify in the next generation. Young children who have had access to tablets and smartphones from early infancy are showing significant delays in developing basic social skills. They struggle to make eye contact, have difficulty interpreting facial expressions, and often prefer interacting with digital characters instead of real people. Teachers report that it is increasingly difficult to maintain children's attention on activities that require patience, concentration, and collaborative social interaction. Pediatricians are documenting a dramatic increase in mental health problems among children, including anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, and emotional regulation difficulties. Even more concerning, many of these children seem to have lost the natural ability to play creatively and imaginatively. When left alone, without digital devices, they often become restless, bored, and unable to entertain or calm themselves without constant external stimulation. But before we despair completely with this dark diagnosis, it is important to remember that recognizing a problem is always the first step to solving it. And while the challenges are real and urgent, we also have unprecedented understanding of how the human mind works, how emotions operate, and how healthy social connections can be cultivated and maintained even in a digital world. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections and modify existing patterns throughout life, means that even adults who grew up with emotional intelligence deficits can learn and develop these skills. The human brain maintains its capacity for change and growth until very late in life, which means it is never too late to begin cultivating deeper and more satisfying forms of emotional connection. Some of the most effective interventions are surprisingly simple, but require conscious intention and consistent practice. Contemplative practices like mindfulness meditation teach people to develop a more conscious and balanced relationship with their own emotional states. Instead of automatically reacting to stress, anxiety, or sadness, they learn to observe these emotions with curiosity and compassion, creating space for wiser and more constructive responses. Nonviolent communication exercises help people express their needs and feelings in ways that create connection instead of conflict. Simple techniques like reflecting back what we hear before responding, asking open questions that invite vulnerability, and sharing our own feelings authentically can transform superficial relationships into deeply satisfying connections. Gratitude practices, when done consistently, literally reconfigure the brain to perceive and focus on the positive aspects of human experience. People who spend a few minutes daily consciously appreciating the connections and positive experiences in their lives develop greater emotional resilience and feel more connected to others. Even more important, we need to begin creating spaces and cultures that actively cultivate and reward emotional intelligence. This means designing digital environments that prioritize quality of connection over quantity of engagement. It means creating physical spaces where people can meet face to face without the constant distraction of devices. It means teaching emotional skills in schools with the same rigor that we teach mathematics and science. Some visionary companies are already beginning to recognize that employees with high emotional intelligence are more creative, more collaborative, more resilient to stress, and more capable of leading effective teams. They are investing in training programs that teach skills like empathetic listening, conscious communication, and constructive conflict resolution. In the sphere of education, progressive schools are integrating social emotional learning into the core curriculum, teaching children to identify and express their emotions in healthy ways, to develop empathy for others, and to form positive relationships. These skills are not educational luxuries. They are fundamental competencies that will determine these children's ability to thrive in any area of life. But perhaps the most important change needs to happen at the individual level. Each of us needs to make the conscious decision to prioritize the development of our own emotional intelligence and to create relationships based on emotional authenticity instead of digital convenience. This means being willing to have difficult conversations, to share real vulnerabilities, to dedicate time and attention to truly knowing the people in our lives. It means establishing healthy boundaries with technology, creating sacred spaces in our lives where we can exist without the constant distraction of notifications and digital feeds. It can be as simple as having meals without phones, walks without podcasts, or conversations without checking messages every 5 minutes. It means practicing the lost art of simply being present with another human being, of listening not just to respond, but to truly understand, of asking questions that go beyond the superficial and invite genuine revelation of who the person really is behind the social masks we all wear. And perhaps most crucially, it means developing a more compassionate and conscious relationship with ourselves, learning to perceive our own emotional patterns without judgment, understanding which situations make us stressed or anxious, and developing healthy strategies to deal with these emotions. Recognizing our deep emotional needs and finding authentic ways to satisfy them. The truth is that emotional intelligence has always been one of the most valuable skills a human being can possess, but we now live at a historical moment where it has become even more critical. In a world where artificial intelligence can perform many of the cognitive tasks that were once exclusively human, our capacity for genuine emotional connection becomes our most distinctive competitive advantage. Machines can process data, recognize patterns, and even simulate conversations, but they cannot offer the kind of empathetic understanding, emotional support, and authentic intimacy that human beings need to thrive. As more aspects of our lives become automated and digitized, our hunger for real human connection will only grow. This means that people who develop high emotional intelligence will not only have richer and more satisfying personal lives, but also significant professional advantages. They will be the leaders who inspire genuine loyalty, the therapists, teachers, and counselors who really make a difference in people's lives, the romantic partners who create relationships that last decades, the parents who raise emotionally healthy and resilient children. But beyond personal benefits, there is a civilizational dimension to this issue that we cannot ignore. Democracy only works when citizens are able to understand and empathize with perspectives different from their own. Global cooperation on issues like climate change and economic inequality requires the ability to transcend narrow interests and think about the collective welfare of humanity. If an entire generation grows up with emotional intelligence deficits, unable to form deep connections with people different from themselves, the implications for social and political stability are profound. We are already seeing signs of this in the extreme polarization that characterizes public discourse in many developed democracies. People are increasingly unable to have constructive conversations with those who have different political opinions, and increasingly prone to demonize and dehumanize those they see as adversaries. The ability to maintain healthy emotional relationships across differences of opinion, to find shared humanity even amid conflict, to build bridges of understanding instead of walls of division, these are skills that our democracy and our civilization simply cannot survive without. This is why, when Harari warns about the costs of lack of emotional intelligence in 2026, he is not just talking about individual relationships or personal mental health, although these are crucial issues. He is warning about a fundamental threat to our ability to function as a cohesive and cooperative society. He is pointing to a crisis that may determine whether the next generation will build a more connected and compassionate world, or fragment into isolated tribes, each unable to understand or genuinely care about the others. The good news is that we still have time to change course. Emotional intelligence is not a mysterious gift that some people are born with and others are not. It is a set of skills that can be learned, practiced, and developed by anyone willing to invest the necessary time and attention. And unlike many other skills, emotional intelligence becomes more valuable when it is shared. When one person in a relationship, family, or community develops greater capacity for emotional connection, it elevates the quality of all relationships in that system. If these reflections touched something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not found words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the challenges we face as human beings in an era of accelerated technological transformation. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our time and to seek not just understanding, but also practical paths to live with more wisdom, connection, and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth for people who refuse to accept superficiality as the inevitable destiny of human experience. The future of our emotional intelligence, and with it, the future of our relationships, our health, and our inner peace, is not something that simply happens to us. It is something we create through the choices we make each day, each interaction, each moment we decide to be truly present with another human being. In 2026, we will look back and see this moment as the turning point when a generation decided to reclaim the art of being deeply human in the company of other humans, or as the moment when we lost something precious forever. The choice, as always, is ours.
Or if you thought someone was eating the dogs and the cats and the pets, like
That's the third kind of information. That's the intersubjective. I mean, so you have objective,
Yes.
you have subjective, then you have the intersubjective.
okay, what's
The intersubjective realm, this is things that exist in the communication network between people. So this is where you find the image of Jesus, and this is
Right.
where you find the US dollar, and this is where you find the people eating dogs and cats.
right?
It's something that is not objectively true, but it's not just the fantasy of a single individual or the feeling, only I feel it. It's in the communication, in the information network between all of us, or some of us.
Yeah.
If enough people believe it, if enough people talk about it, it connects. Again, even if we continue with these dogs and cats, you know, you had maybe the most important conversation in the world, meant to help the citizens of the United States decide who would control the nuclear weapons
Right.
that could destroy the world.
Exactly.
And the only thing that most people remember from this hour of debate was the dogs and cats.
Welcome to America.
The key problem about the world is not evil, it's ignorance, it's delusion.
When you read Nexus, you say humans are smart but also stupid and self-destructive. So it almost like puts you down a bit.
Humans think that with all our technological development, especially in the field of information technology, we will be freed, liberated from ignorance and delusion. And it's not happening. In the monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam, there is a belief in evil. But in Hinduism and Buddhism, the main idea is that the problem is usually ignorance and delusion. People sometimes think that AI maybe will tell us the truth about the world. Again, it's unlikely to happen. The danger is that AI will entrap us, imprison us within a web of delusions even worse than anything we have seen before in history. Once an entity has the capacity to suffer, it enters the ethical realm. It becomes an ethical subject. To burn a chair is not an ethical issue because the chair can't suffer. When you harm an animal, a sentient being, this is an ethical issue because it can suffer. And there are so many political discussions which revolve around that. For instance, the whole discussion of abortion. It's not the only issue, but a very central issue. Are fetuses conscious? Can they suffer or not? Are they ethical subjects in their own right or not? The same with animal rights. Can cows suffer? Can chickens suffer? Can fish suffer? And so forth.